It's better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection. Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit. Gonna mark the date. It's January 28th, 2022. Glad to have you back. Glad to continue on my pursuit along with your pursuit. And just wanted to share a quick memory from last night. So I think a part of all of our pursuit, we need to focus, or I want to encourage you to focus on creating memories, doing things, having experiences. So last night, Leo and I drove over to Columbus, Ohio, which is about 2.5 hour drive, easy drive. Some good one-on-one time to go watch the U.S. men's national soccer team play El Salvador for a World Cup qualifying game. And I was able to get these tickets from a friend of mine, so I appreciate the hookup, Brandon. Shout out to you for giving this cool opportunity for Leo and I. So we drove over. When I got the tickets, I was excited. Then I found out that the stadium in Columbus was open roof. And in the Midwest, you can't see it right now, but it's snowing here in Indy, and Columbus has very similar weather. So it was in the low 30s. I'm not one who does cold very well, so I was a little nervous. But we got there, and the cold didn't matter. It was a great game. We won 1-0. I'm going to go with the proper football terms, 1-0. So the U.S. got 3 points to the World Cup qualifier, and it was a great time. We saw an awesome goal. It was just a great memory. Drive home. Leo had school today, so we got home really late, but he just slept in the car. And the whole point of that is that's an experience that in the past I probably would have passed up. A school night, it's going to be cold. But as I was there with Leo, looking over at him, we were having conversations, celebrating the goal, running up to get food during halftime and just talking. I realized, and I already knew this, but I realized that I want to do more things like that, whatever they may be. It doesn't always have to be traveling far. It could just be going for walks with the family, going to the parks, but doing cool experiences rather than having excuses not to go. Leo woke up today tired, and I'm sure he'll be a little dragging today, but we have this great memory that we're going to remember. We've got some good pictures, some good video. He actually got an NFT out of it, which I thought was pretty cool. They had an artist drew a drawing for that particular match that you could claim as an NFT. So while we go on this pursuit and we're talking about personal growth and professional growth, don't forget to make sure that if it's for you, I guess I shouldn't project my pursuit and my values onto you, but if part of your pursuit and values is family-oriented and experiences, don't forget to do those things. There's a great book that we give out to clients at Harmless Wealth called The Family Boardroom or Family Board Meeting. And the author actually came and spoke to the AGC. And the concept is, as parents, we have 18 summers with our kids, and we need to make sure we have these experiences. So I won't tell you what it is. It's a very short book. I highly recommend it. Again, we give it to new clients if it makes sense for their personal situation. Go check that out and think about that and have experiences. Do things you wouldn't normally do to create memories that will last forever and enjoy the moment and be present. So I wanted to lead off with that. I also wanted to give a quick update on the next episode. Terry and I, it's weird to call my dad Terry. Terry and I recorded the first episode of the next episode this week, and I believe I'm going to start dropping those episodes on Tuesday. So Tuesdays, the podcast will come out, and probably Thursday, the video will come out. I got to get with Tyler on how long it'll take to turn those around. I think those video edits might be a little easier. So be on the lookout for the first episode of the next episode on All About Your Benjamins on Tuesday of next week. So let's get to today's episode. I think it's going to be a little shorter than usual, but a lot of it stems from this book. So if you're listening, you can't see it, but if you're watching, you see I'm holding up Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. And I shared this on Twitter, but if you don't follow me on Twitter, I got this book. It kind of random the way I got it. A quote of his showed up in my Instagram feed. I knew who he was. Maybe in the last year or so, I kind of discovered him. Maybe a little bit further back when we're going to end with a conversation about Kobe. I was going back and watching videos, and I saw he interviewed Kobe. And forget how he came on my radar, but he's got a podcast called On Purpose. And I was always talking about purpose and passion. And I have a T-shirt that says On Purpose. So just kind of these weird connections. And another weird connections after I told my wife how much I was enjoying this book is that back in 2018, we put a video of Silas waiting for his brothers to get off the bus. And it's really cool. He gets really excited. He was just learning how to walk, and the boys get off the bus, and they run to him and hug him, and it really is a cool moment. I'm glad we captured it on film. And that video of Silas actually went viral. I think it had like 50,000 views on my page, but then I remember my wife telling me, Ange said, somebody with a big account retweeted this and shared this on Instagram. And come to find out, it was Jay Shetty 3 years ago who shared a video of Silas. So kind of weird how, I think these occurrences happen, and I don't know him. I'm going to manifest it here that one day I want to have a conversation with him. I would love to have Jay Shetty join me on the pursuit to have this conversation, because as I was reading his book, and I'm going to do some reading from the book today, which is not always the best way to do a podcast, but there are some statements in this book and some things that he says that I just want to share today, and maybe give a little bit of commentary, but not too much, mainly because the imposter syndrome is in me. We all battle it from time to time. Questions, who am I to be helping people along with their pursuit and giving this advice and encouragement and things to think about? I'm just a soon-to-be 40-year-old husband and father in Fishers, Indiana. I have a RIA that I started and built that I consider to be successful. Co-founded a community, but I'm not at a level of a Jay Shetty. I'm not interviewing Will Smith and Kobe and Oprah. Who am I to share all these things? Oh, look at that phone going off. We're going to keep that going. Put that on silent for a second. Thought I had that there. The imposter syndrome. And I share all of this because I can't not talk about it. And the feedback I get from people that I know encourages me to keep on going. Positive reinforcement, seeing people light up, getting them to question things and think about things as well, just tells me that I'm on the right path. But every once in a while you wonder. So as I'm reading Jay's book, page 1 of the chapter 1, there's the intro, but in chapter 1 it starts off with a quote, and it says, "It's better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection." I promise you, I had not read this book before last week's episode, where I started to talk about how sometimes we live within the constraints of other people's expectations of us. We live under their limitations, which is kind of what this is saying. It's better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection. And this is tilting more towards you're trying to be somebody else, but I also think that, living the imitation of somebody else's life could also mean living the imitation of somebody else's life for you. So as I read that quote, I thought, okay, I like this already. This is speaking my language. And I guess we sometimes have to be careful to not get caught up in an echo chamber and only reading and listening to things that resonate with us. But for me, this book just gives me more confidence that I'm on to something meaningful and I need to keep pursuing it. So I've talked about signs in the past. I won't know until later whether or not this book was a sign. But I've got to imagine the reason I started looking at Jay Shetty recently, a random quote on Instagram, which led me to his page, which led me to his book that I bought immediately and started reading and got right into it real quick. So I think there's more to why this book showed up, and I think it is to give me more encouragement to keep having these conversations. So that was the first quote I wanted to read. It's better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to live an imitation of somebody else's life with perfection. And then I flip to the next page, and there's another one. But often our identity has so many layers that we lose sight of the real us, if we ever knew who or what that was in the first place. And I really like this because as I sit down with people and I ask them what their goals are, their aspirations, what do we want to plan for, a lot of times you get the surface level answers. I want to retire. I want to put my kids through college. I want to buy a house. I want to pay off debt. And those are all important financial goals. Don't get me wrong. But they're not really why we live. Nobody's main goal in life is to retire. Nobody's main goal in life is to buy a house. Maybe one of their main goals is to set their kids up to have success in the future. So maybe college tilts that way, but still, that's not going to be what really drives somebody. So a lot of times what I've realized is people don't really know what they want, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if they've never taken the time to really figure it out. We're all busy. When do we have time to sit down and really, really do some work on ourselves to figure out what is it that I really want? What am I most happy about? Where do I light up versus where do I just kind of get by? And that's what these conversations I hope help is spur those conversations. So a lot of us don't really know who we are. And if we don't know who we are and what drives us, then how can we even make that life a possibility? So again, another statement that I think ties into some of the things I've been talking about. So as I read it and I see somebody like Jay Shetty who, take it back up, sorry. If you don't know who Jay Shetty is, he's a former monk. So the story's great. I won't spoil it because that's part of why I like this book is hearing his story and how he got to where he was. but decided not to pursue the career he thought he was going to go down, became a monk, and then ultimately learned that his purpose was to leave being a monk and to go out and, for lack of a better term, spread the word, help people develop the insight that he has, find meaning in their life. He talks about meditation and breath work a lot, which really resonates with me. So, but to have somebody who was once a monk, has more enlightenment than I do, more knows himself better than I know myself, say these things as I was just saying a few weeks ago, gives me confidence to keep on this pursuit. So the next quote I wanted to go over, and it's kind of a combination of the first two quotes. How can we recognize who we are and what makes us happy when we're chasing the distorted reflection of someone else's dreams? Again, so many of us live in a box that we didn't create. There is a life that we would rather live outside of that box, but we're afraid to bust it open. And I've got a shirt that is the planning process I want my firm to go through, that is helping people break that box, realign it, and create a life that really brings them the greatest happiness. But if we're constrained by what other people say we're supposed to do, parents, other family members, society, a lot of the identity that people have is created by society says. You're supposed to go to college. You're supposed to work 30 years. Men are supposed to be this way. Women are supposed to be this way. Who determined all that, and why is that what we all buy into? And I think it's not very many of us have questioned it or really did a deep dive to see how do I feel about that, and do I have other feelings, and am I brave enough to go outside of those norms and do things my way? I'm encouraged. I think more people are today, and I think that's going to lead to greater happiness and a happier society and a better world, but it's going to take some time to get there. And on this page, and I think I'm going to go through and in the show notes on this blog post over the weekend, I won't do it before getting this out today. I'm going to go through and I'll put these quotes in the blog post. So after the summary, I'll do a little show note so you can read them. I'd highly encourage buying the book, but I'll put these quotes in there so you can read them as well. That way you don't have to jot them down if you're driving. Another one, and I really like this, and this is actually bolded in the book. When you try to live your most authentic life, some of your relationships will be put in jeopardy. Losing them is a risk worth bearing. Finding a way to keep them in your life is a challenge worth taking on. We've talked about relationships before. People come in our lives. Sometimes we hold on to them too long. Sometimes they're not right for us. Again, somebody as wise as Jay Shetty saying that gives me confidence that I have a good thought process. I really like the last line, though. Losing them is a risk worth bearing. Finding a way to keep them in your life is a challenge worth taking on. Now, I don't know exactly what Jay means by that, but I have a way that I interpret that. So Derek Grant, a friend of mine, you guys hear about all the time. We've talked about people being on the same frequency and growing and getting better and moving up in their life. And sometimes those who are close to us are on a frequency with us for a little while, but they don't grow with us. So this isn't necessarily the case in my life, but just give you an example, a husband and wife. They're on the same frequency early in life, and we all grow and mature as people, and sometimes we grow in a different direction than we started. I think that's a lot of reason there's divorce is people get married at a younger age before they've really grown and figured out who they are, and they grow down a path, and the two grow in different directions. And it's not a good or bad thing. It's just that who they are 10 years later isn't who they started out to be when they first got married, and it just isn't a right fit anymore. Obviously, there's divorce for other reasons, but I do think there are sometimes divorce where people just grow apart because they got together too early. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think that there's also the possibility that as somebody begins to elevate themselves, their spouse may not be right with them, and potentially that spouse elevates away from the other. The challenge worth taking on is, without forcing, can you bring your spouse up with you, or up with you fast enough to stay to where you don't drift apart? So I think there are certain people, and I think Jay is saying this, but my interpretation is there are people who come into our life that at a certain point it's okay to not be with them anymore. There are other people in our life that it is important to take on the challenge of helping them grow and get better and elevate with us as we're elevating. So I think that's something that Derek and I talk about a lot, and I think that's a good thing to think about. Is I've talked about it's okay to leave people behind, but I also think it's okay to try to bring people with you if they're that special and that important to you. Another one, hopefully you don't mind me reading all these quotes, but these just get me excited. My book is all marked up. Our families, our friends, society, media We are surrounded by images and voices telling us who we should be and what we should do. I won't spend any more time on that, but again, we live lives that other people dictate for us, and I don't think we should. So we can use those as influence maybe to guide us and to give us feedback if we're heading down the right path, but ultimately it's inside. It's your heart. It's your passion. That's what needs to lead you. Don't worry about what everybody else thinks. And on that note, I was going to tease at the end. I'm going to be recording next week's episode on Monday with a friend of mine. He put out a tweet talking about how he was done worrying about what other people think. F them, basically. We need to get that attitude and not worry about what others think. So I'm excited to have the conversation with Dr. I won't ruin it now, but with the doctor on Monday. So next Friday we can hear it about why and how he got to that point. His story is amazing, and not letting the thoughts of other people hold us back. Again, remember, we've talked about it before, the way people feel about us, there's usually some truth to it, but a lot of times, especially when it's negative, it is something in us that they don't like that reminds them of themselves. So when you're on your pursuit and people aren't supporting or they're telling you it's not a good idea, there's probably some love behind that, but there's also probably some regret that they're not doing the same thing or they never did. And you have to remember that. So don't let the influences of others take away your happiness or shape the direction that you go. Use the feedback and process it, but don't let just because someone says, no, you can't do it, keep you from doing it. The only way to build a meaningful life is to filter out that noise and look within. And that's not even on the same page. There's paragraphs in between those two quotes, but they go together beautifully. I'm almost done reading to you. Let me see what page I need to go to next. All right, almost done. All right, we got a long one, but I think this is great. So he talks about his time as a monk. Our teachers at the ashram explained that there are higher and lower values. Higher values propel and elevate us toward happiness, fulfillment, and meaning. Lower values demote us toward anxiety, depression, and suffering. According to the Gita, there are the higher values and qualities: fearlessness, purity of mind, gratitude, service and charity, acceptance, performing sacrifice, deep study, austerity, straightforwardness, nonviolence, truthfulness, absence of anger, renunciation, perspective, restraint from fault-finding, compassion toward all living beings, satisfaction, gentleness, kindness, integrity, determination. Notice that happiness and success are not among these values. These are not values, they are rewards, the end game, and we address this in chapter 4. So go back to that last statement. I probably could have gotten to that, but I wanted you to hear all those other things, those higher values. Note that happiness and success are not among these values. These are not values, they are the rewards, the end games. So if we hold those values they listed, or other values that resonate with you that are positive in nature, the happiness and success comes with it. Going back to one of my beliefs that if you're pursuing your passions and that's what you're able to incorporate in your life, and if you're fortunate enough to make that your profession, then that might require you to make some financial sacrifices, bring things down a little bit. But if you're constantly in a positive state and you're doing what you love and you're happy, then your productivity becomes better. Your work becomes better. You do a better job, and with that comes the success. And if needed, with that success comes the financial rewards that you might need. So there's a little bit of that in this as well. And then the final one is, I love community. It helps to find a community that reflects who you want to be. A community that looks like the future you want. Let's go back to the record. The future version of yourself. It exists. It's already out there on the record. You have to lift the needle up and move it over and drop it where you want to be and embody that version of yourself, and eventually the physical world will catch up. Another way to help you do that is surround yourself with people that are doing the things that you want to be doing. So we want to make sure we have a supportive community with us today, but also if that community is not where you want to be, you've got to find those people doing the things where you want to be and surround yourself with them as well. And going back to leaving people and people come in our lives, not an easy decision, but everybody's on their own journey. And those people served a purpose to you and you served a purpose to them. And it's time for you to elevate and move to the next group. You go. And maybe there are some people in that group you're getting ready to leave that are worth fighting for to bring with you up to that next level. It doesn't mean you leave everybody behind, but there are some people who are not willing to elevate to that next level to where you are, because that level that you're ready to leave, that might be the level they wanted to go to. They may have joined you because you were that person they wanted to be around. You were doing the things that they wanted to do, and that was their cap. That was their mountaintop. Your mountaintop might be higher. So even though you might feel bad leaving them, you served the purpose. You helped them elevate themselves to where they want to be, and now it's time for you to go do what they did and get to that next level. So community support, the people around you, is very, very important. So again, those are quotes. I'll try not to read to you every week. We got 2 weeks coming up. I mentioned next week I have a guest. I have a guest the following week for a conversation that started from some text back and forth. So we'll go through a couple weeks of me not reading to you. But sometimes I just have these quotes I think are really good. I envy somebody like Jay because I feel like a lot of what he said that I read today, I've said before. I don't say it as eloquently. I don't say it to the point where somebody wants to go recite it. I'm thinking in this out loud, so it's not as concise and as smooth as what he says. So I wanted to share that. I also wanted to give me the confidence that these thoughts that I've had and I've talked about before reading the book are in something that aligns with what I value, where I want to go. And finally, hopefully sharing his work puts me on a vibration with him that one day we cross. If you happen to know Jay Shetty, make an intro. I would love it. It'd be an awesome conversation. And I also feel like I could gain a lot from talking to him to project me forward. I'll be truthful real quick before we wrap up. In reading his book early on and seeing some of my thoughts in his book, again, they're his thoughts as well, but the thoughts I had come to on my own and through experience and conversation that I would consider original thoughts, there's a little bit of jealousy that he has the ability to impact so many people, write a book and sell millions of copies, have a YouTube channel that has millions of subscribers and millions of views, and be able to deliver that message to so many people and impact. I don't know if depending on how long you've been reading and following, if you go back far enough, you'll see I wrote a blog post that my mission statement I condensed down to one word, and it's impact. I want to impact everybody that I come across, and the more impact I can have, the better, I think. And I look at his audience versus my audience, and I love my audience. Again, I don't do this for the numbers, but every once in a while it's kind of like, man, what's the disconnect between me and Jay Shetty? What put him on a path that gives him a bigger audience to impact more people, and me? And then I just realized that's all ego. It doesn't matter. If my real reason for wanting to have these conversations is to help me along on my pursuit and kind of document my thoughts and growth, and be kind of a little bit of a therapy session, but also help others. Who cares if it's millions of people or 2 other people? If I'm impacting one person, that's really all that matters, and I'm accomplishing what I want to accomplish. I'm having a high conversion of impact. Maybe I had thousands of people listening, but nobody cared, and I have 2 people listening, and one of them goes down their path and goes down takes on a risk or takes an opportunity they never would have if they didn't have that thought process going from the podcast. One is better than none out of 1,000. So, not sure why I shared that, but I just was thinking about it as I was preparing for this. And, there was a moment of jealousy as I read his book, and I identified it real quick and just checked myself. Like, my goal in life is not to have millions of YouTube viewers or millions of podcast listeners or to travel the world speaking. I think that'd be really cool. And if that's what I'm supposed to do, I would welcome it, but that's not why I'm doing this. Again, even though I know I have an idea of the listeners, I don't check regularly. I'm not trying actively to grow my audience. I'm not spending money on advertising and going on podcast circuits to try to get more listeners. So that's not really my motivation. But then when you see your thoughts on a stage like that, you're like, man, I could have that impact on a greater stand. It's kind of like, man, what did I do different? But at the end of the day, that's not why. So, I guess I share that as you go on your pursuit, you may find yourself in a similar position and realize that it could be your ego that is making things a little bit slower or making you question what it is that you're doing, and strip that ego away and go back to your why and the purpose and the passion behind things. So the last thing I want to end with is this week celebrated 2 years of Kobe Bryant's passing. And I was talking to somebody, and they mentioned that they knew somebody that Kobe's death really hit him hard. And I would say that I was somebody that his death really impacted as well. Now, Kobe, for multiple reasons. One, Kobe was my second favorite basketball player. And basketball was my life growing up. Michael Jordan, Kobe, easy. 1A, 1B, honestly. But at the time of his passing, I was listening to a lot of his business talks. I don't know if you followed his career after basketball, but Kobe he took that Mamba mentality from the court and implemented it in the business world. He did a short movie that won an Academy Award. His first movie wins an Academy Award because of that drive, and he was just doing incredible things in the business standpoint and also being a tremendous father. So at the time, I was watching a lot of his videos, and it just brings you closer and closer to an individual. And I remember clear as day being in Greenwood, Indiana, at Greenwood Middle School, watching Roman play a basketball game. My in-laws were there because they live on the south side of Indianapolis. And I remember scrolling through Twitter when Roman wasn't in the game. Truth be told, when I'm not coaching and my kids aren't in the game, I care a little bit less and I scroll through. Not a good thing to say. Not proud of it, but I'm selfish in the standpoint of that. I'm there to see my kids. I want the team to do well, but I care about the boys more. And I'll scroll if I get a little bored. So I'm scrolling through, and then I see on Twitter TMZ saying that Kobe Bryant had died in a helicopter crash. And I remember just trying to find confirmation. Was it true? If I'm being honest, I probably missed a little bit of Roman's game because I was so distracted by it because it was a shock, obviously. And we all know the story and the outcome and everything. But when I think about it, I don't know if Kobe's death directly impacted the path that I've gone on since, the conversations of pursuit, where I've got about repositioning my life, following passion. But I do know that when I think about that, and for some reason I do think about it often, it is a reminder to do what I'm doing, to change things and make sure that my passions and my purpose is at the center of everything that I'm doing, and that I'm enjoying the time that I have, because we just don't know. So I couldn't let this week go by without just acknowledging that and just sharing what that event meant. It was very sad in the moment. I think about his daughter on the helicopter and her life getting cut short, and thinking about if it was me and the boys, or it just crushes me. I remember crying multiple days, and it gets me emotional now thinking about it. And Kobe was a couple years older than me, so but it reminds me of what it is that I'm doing. And I'm actually going to finish out my sleeve on my right arm of tattoos, and I am getting a snake, and I can't pronounce the words, but it's basically a snake eating its own tail, and it represents rebirth and life, and the one that I found is actually in the shape of an infinity sign, but if you turn the infinity sign up and down, it's a figure 8. One of Kobe's numbers was 8, and I'm gonna actually have the snake that I'm getting the tattoo of be a black mamba as a reminder. The 8 is just kind of coincidental. I like the 8 version better than the infinity sign, but it is going to be a black mamba rather than the snake that I found, just as a reminder of Kobe and what he was doing and what that means to me. And then also a reminder just to bring that Mamba mentality to everything that I do. Some people might think that's silly, but all of my tattoos have meaning. When I look down at my arm, I want them to inspire me and remind me of things. And while that may not make sense to everybody, it makes sense to me. So I have some other things I'm going to get, and I'll share as I get them. But I did want to make sure to bring Kobe to this week's, because I think it fits in. So that is it. Remember, we got a guest on next week's episode, a guest on the following week, and then we'll get back to me kind of talking through the pursuit unless some other things come up. So appreciate you all tuning in. I hope you're getting something from these conversations. And if you have any topics or discussions you want, or if you want to join me on an episode, I'll be getting back to doing some illustrations and some drawings, minting them as NFTs. I will do some NFTs that the owner of it gets to be a guest on the podcast, and we can talk about one of these topics as you as a guest. I think it'd be kind of cool to bring some of the listeners on the podcast as well. So appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate your support. Hope that this is a benefit to you, and I'm looking forward to doing this together. So let's keep on. I'm going to keep on my pursuit, and you keep on your pursuit, and we'll do this all together. So let's keep on pursuing.